welcome to our event tonight. This is our this is the Utah Coalition of Reason's National Day of Reason panel discussion. So tonight we'll be hearing from 4 of the individuals, leaders in the free thought community on the topic of religion and reason here in Utah. This is meant to be mostly a panel discussion. If you have questions, however, please feel free to raise your hand, and what will be done is that either myself or Evelyn will come around with a paper that you can write it on. And then we will keep those in mind to ask around the end of this event. You can also submit questions via Twitter if you just tweet them to @ReasonUtah, and then we'll be monitoring that throughout the event too. Now I will turn this over to our panel moderator, Brian Trick.
All right, well, good evening. I'm Brian Trick. Welcome again to Utah's Godless Talk for Reason and Religion, to our evening. Just want to kind of reiterate what we just talked about, that because of time, we really do want to restrict any questions from the audience directly. We have about an hour, and we've got a lot of issues that they'd like to cover, and we would like to get your questions involved, so please feel free to Twitter or talk with Zach and Evelyn, and they'll be happy to get your questions to me, and we'll move them on to the group. Now, we've had our webpage open for the last about 2 to 3 weeks, and we've also talked to various members in the society and have assembled the questions, a number of questions already, and that's the ones we're going to be proposing to the panelists. And other than that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So our government is a collection of laws, policies, and practices that are used to govern all the people of our state, of all religion and non-religious backgrounds, and different views and different perspectives, to allow them to live in a community where everyone can benefit from the existence of the government, yet no single belief or viewpoint is exclusively promoted. In Utah, the balance seems to be heavily weighted in one direction. Tonight, we've assembled some voices from the secular community, and we'd ask them questions, including those from the audience, around these issues. So first, I'd like to introduce, in no particular order, this was the order I received them, Elaine Stehel. She's been a member of the Humanists of Utah since 2009, when they were instrumental in helping her to co-found the University of Utah group, SHIFT, Secular Humanism, Inquiry, and Free Thought. Elaine became a certified humanist minister in 2011, and since then has officiated over 10 heterosexual and same-sex weddings ceremonies. We can thank that. Very helpful for the 7 days of bliss, Utah. Elaine married her partner of 4.5 years on December 20th, 2013. And she lives with her new wife and the 2 cats, Colonel Pendleton and Ty, in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Salt Lake City. Next, Dan. Dan Ellis is the president of the Atheists of Utah. He recently was selected as the regional director in Utah for American Atheist by our convention. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Josh Kay is a physics student at the University of Utah and director of the Postmos. Postmos is a local post-Mormon support and social group. And finally, we have Joanne Hanks. Joanne Hanks grew up Mormon. She married a Mormon, and then with her and her husband, joined a Mormon-based polygamous cult. 7 years later, she said "phooey" and left. In her book, "It's Not About the Sex, My Ass," Joanne shares her story with humor, satire, and insight. She says she wishes to be able to hope to amuse, outrage, and show how anyone can be duped. And there'll be more information around her book also that's available in the back of the room. So thank you, Joanne. Finally, we are having, there's the Day of Caring, or Month of Caring. There's a clipboard that we pass around that if you're interested, there's some information on that. Plus, we'll make it available in the back when you exit. So, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So we have several subjects to cover tonight, and I'm just going to start with the first one that we came up here, and it's basically going to get right to the heart of it. It's religion's effects on society. So to start with. Elaine, you're making eye contact. So, So let's start with a broad question, one that cuts to the very subject of what we're talking about. And it's, churches have been questioning science for a very long time. That's kind of one of the reasons why we're here. And the debate seems to be getting louder now. We're hearing a lot more of it. We've seen the evolution versus creation talks on TV. So I guess the question is how is this science versus religion debate affecting our society's view of science? And where do you see that this is causing issues with our everyday, with the way society sees science?
I think this question, we had a couple of days to think about the questions that had been coming in the past couple of weeks. And this one, I really started thinking about the local application. In Utah, we have a very unique situation where our LDS neighbors don't quite agree with most evangelical Christians in America on the dichotomy between science and religion. And so we have these amazing science museums here, and we have a lot of opportunities for children to learn about science, and we have world-famous dinosaur tracks and evolutionary materials for kids to come and learn about, and people to learn about all the time. And so Mormons, at least I grew up LDS, and most Mormon people that I know love science, embrace it, accept evolution as a method that God put in place. And so we don't have quite the same vitriol against science here in our Utah community. I would say that there are certainly fundamental Christian and fundamental Mormon enclaves throughout the state, and of course more broadly in America that take a different view and really sort of distance themselves from one side or the other. But as a humanist, I really don't, I don't personally see a true rift there. I think that you can be religious and certainly embrace the awe of scientific inquiry.
Josh?
So I see a rift that does occur between religion and science, particularly here in Utah. I know, well, I have a number of acquaintances, some of them very close, who completely deny evolution. And it's all ages. You find that younger people typically accept evolution or have some weird explanation for it. And I know a lot of people who are very much in the church who also agree with evolution. And so it does have an effect in not being able to talk about some of those particular issues. And frankly, once evolution does come up, and when you do have proof for it, you find that people start to question the church in some ways. But there's other ways where science and religion have rifts here in Utah. Just look at LGBTQ issues, or coffee and alcohol, or any of the other number of backward things in this state. So.
Dan?
Oh, I would just second most of Josh's thoughts. You know, I have several religious relatives and friends, Mormon specifically, of course, because we're here in Utah, who deny that evolution is real. You know, they have a huge problem with science saying that evolution is what brought us to where we are today, and it's because of their religious belief specifically. It's not that they're religious and choose to accept or choose to choose to hold the view that evolution is true. They specifically deny it because of their religion, and they won't. You know, several of them actively avoid any discussion or any learning about evolution because they're afraid it will destroy their faith.
Being a member of a cult, being an ex-member of a cult, I have a little different perspective, and our cult leader would explain away science. So I think there's a lot more crazy cultish mindsets around the state than you realize. And those kinds of groups, those kinds of people are becoming more polarized, I believe. They're going to become more fanatical, more fundamental in their beliefs about science and religion, and they're going to use their religious beliefs to explain everything, even if it's, makes no sense at all.
And this is a perfect segue to a little larger issue that I might put out to the panel of, as we're teaching, or as the church is teaching people to distrust science and to trust other forms, someone speaking to them, some prophet, a book. What kind of issues, this opens them up for all sorts of issues around not trusting science. Have you seen places where people make choices that, in your community or outside of your community, where people are making choices based, bad choices based on a belief as opposed to the science behind it? So, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think beyond religion, it has a lot to do with skepticism. We have people who don't employ any kind of scientific skepticism in a wide variety of things. When it comes to stem cell research, when it comes to evolution, when it comes to a lot of other things that benefit us, regular medicine versus homeopathy, all kinds of crazy things that they actively deny science, and a lot of that is because they've been taught through their religion that science is bad, or science is wrong, or science is trying to lead them away from their faith, and so they actively, it goes back to what I said earlier, where they actively deny a large portion of science or specific parts of science when they feel that it's a direct threat to their religion. So
this also would lead us to another question, which is, as the leaders are teaching their members, to follow belief first. This situation can develop a social obedience, where the expectation is that you follow other people's words over what you believe. Joanne, in your book, you talk about your family's journal into the true and living Church of Jesus Christ, and even
Saints
in
of the last days.
I'm sorry, the last days. Sorry, I feel horrible mispronouncing their name.
These long titles that are so
Yeah, how did that social obedience help fuel the ability for you to walk down that path you did? Having read your book, it's quite a horrific path.
Well, I contend that the indoctrination I received growing up in the LDS Church, being told to obey my father, obey my church leaders, obey God, it was always to obey a man, obey my husband, and so whatever they said went. That's where I would follow, and I don't think I was really that uneducated, except when it came to men. I think the issue was yeah, I could be intelligent, have a college degree, but the final word was whatever man was superior to me or my leader, that's who I had to submit to.
So I'm going to pick on you a little, Elaine, and I promise to get fair coverage to everyone. So as you're a minister or a clergy, some of the issues that come up with the pressure around the church, obedience, there's expectations. There's expectations about family, children, and also being a member of the gay lesbian community. Those issues have a little twist. How do you find those affect the people that you deal with and you yourself?
Many of the couples and families that I work with in my humanist ministry, which I was ordained in 2011, and I've done weddings for couples who come from all sorts of non-religious backgrounds. And so in working with them, I've really strived to branch out a little bit from what's expected, because obviously if they're going to ask a young lesbian humanist to officiate at their wedding, they're not necessarily worried about adhering to tradition. And so I try to make that experience for them as seamless as possible with their families, because these couples are already very secure in their belief and their understanding of who they are and what they want for their lives, but their families are sometimes much more resistant to that. Like you say, they've been taught all their life that they're supposed to have a bishop of the LDS church marry them, or that they're supposed to go through a temple ceremony, or that they are certainly supposed to have some sort of religious leader talk about God and the importance of obedience in their ceremony. And so that's been, honestly, for me, a very fulfilling part of working with the couples that I've married and being able to talk with their families. I try to meet with the families of the couples before the wedding happens and ask them, what was your wedding like? What experiences did you take away from that? What advice would you give to your son or daughter? So that when I'm crafting the ceremony, while it's personal to that couple, it also respects and incorporates the beliefs and the cultures of the families that the couples come from.
Thank you. And Josh, I'm sure. Okay, so the question is, and we've kind of moved a little bit here, about the effects of obedience. And as people leave, since they were post-Mormon, I'm sure there's a lot in the atheist community as well, as people leave the church, this affects, what does this do to people's lives? What are they not ready for and such?
Well, let me give you an experience. I have this friend that I went to high school with, and she married after knowing this guy for a week or two at BYU, and basically stayed in this abusive relationship for years. She finally got out of it, and when she commented to me on it, she said, it was a learning experience. I'm glad I did it. And just like not being able to question your reality, not being able to think outside the box that this might actually be wrong, it's damaging to people's lives. And like recently with the ordained women movement, I was down there and filmed a little bit, and we met a lady who was wearing purple. We thought she was part of the ordained women movement, but she was wondering, what are you guys doing here? And we explained to her what people were there for, and she immediately said, those women should go back to primary where they belong. And after talking to my mom, I shouldn't have said that. After talking to someone, someone very close to me said that, too late now. That those women at the ordained women movement think they can lead the church better than the men. And so like, it just absolutely astounds me how kind of repressed people are, how much they don't want to think outside the box, and like how much it does affect people's lives. And we see that effect all the time, just with people who can't leave religion and not have it affect their lives. And I mean, there's plenty of examples of that I'm sure we'll get to.
So, Dan, I've got a follow-up for you if you have
I'll have
comments on that.
follow-up questions.
So, with obedience, one of the issues is basically,
Whenever I hear obedience and talk of the LDS Church, it always brings to mind that song. Well, lately, since someone in the group posted it, the whole "Do as I'm doing, follow me." Do that, right? That,
well, funny you should say that. So my question is about sex.
I don't think they cover that in Sunday school.
You know, your community, the atheist community, you have involvement in at-risk teens, or do you do anything with any of the groups that try to give sex education to these kids that come in that are completely unprepared? Because do as I'm doing, follow me doesn't tell them what to do.
Well, unless they're in a cult like Joanne. Joanne could probably tell us a little bit more about that later. No, I mean, we, Atheists of Utah, works with several local groups. We work with T, and what's awesome is UCOR, thank you guys so much for hosting this and putting this all together, and also in getting all of the other groups to work more closely with each other. You know, it's awesome that we don't have to try to reinvent the wheel every time we want to do anything, and we can, you know, the great thing about the culture here in Utah, you're very welcome. The great thing about the culture here in Utah is that because the LDS Church is so prevalent here and so controlling, there's this wonderful groundswell of a counterculture. And so Atheists of Utah, you know, works with all of the other groups here. We work with T, we work with the Homeless Youth Resource Center. A couple of years ago, for our annual winter gala, we donated, I want to say $1,500 to the Homeless Youth Resource Center that we managed to raise through the gala. So we don't, you know, Atheists of Utah doesn't provide any specific counseling or education as far as sexual education, but we do work with other groups who do. I don't know if I mentioned T, but they're the transgender education advocates. We also work with them and have donated quite a bit of time and money to help
You
them
do
with
stuff
things.
with Planned Parenthood too.
Yeah, we also work with Planned Parenthood. Generally, we're the group who shows up to help them put together their safe sex kits for the Pride Festival every year. We'll be doing that here this month, actually, in a couple of weeks.
So, Elaine, you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that to say that the Humanists of Utah as well work with the LGBT Homeless Youth Resource Center, regularly collecting donations. But one thing that I've seen in the non-religious, non-theistic community is that there are many religious humanists in Utah, a surprising number. There are many secular humanists who really want nothing to do with any sort of organized religion, but there are also a great number of religious humanists in Utah who are members of Unitarian Universalist churches, and these communities have sort of the church foundation of an active community addressing social justice issues. And so there's actually an incredible sex education, fully comprehensive sex education program called OWL, Our Whole Lives, that's run by the Unitarian Church here in Salt Lake City. Absolutely amazing. Anybody can sign up for it. You don't have to be Unitarian. It's an amazing resource. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Great. Joanne, did you? Your whole book is about sex education.
Yeah, there is still a big problem. You know, you hear the headlines about Warren Jeffs and the polygamous community down on the border. My particular group was in Manti, you know, a 99% Mormon community. And the state police came to visit us off and on, and they'd have chats with Jim Harmston, and he'd tell them, you know, everything's okay, but everything wasn't okay. One of the women that came and joined our group had left a group, polygamous group in Ogden, Arvin Shreve, and she was actually on the sex offender list and had been in jail for teaching girls how to have sex to prepare them for when they married the prophet or their polygamous husband. And, you know, it's funny, but it's going on. And so there's an area that, I don't know who's working on that, if anyone is. Maybe after tonight I will. But, you know, there's a lot of these secretive hidden groups that are abusing girls, indoctrinating them. The fact that we were able to get away with our leader marrying a girl on the day she turned 16. My husband, who was 34, 35 at the time, marrying a 17-year-old girl. My daughters, luckily we left, but they look back, they were just, you know, 6, 7 years old when we left, but they look back and realized that they would have been married off to polygamous men. And then just the wives, not just the young girls, it's all abusive. And the state just lets it slide. They won't, they'll let, Texas or Nevada take care of it.
Thank you, yeah. It's, I'm not sure what we're covering is part of the issue with the church, or with religion. I don't want to make any insinuation here that believing in a religion or following a religion makes you more, that there will be sexual abuse. But certainly, not being able to make decisions on your own will put you in a situation where you won't be making the decisions on your own. And the work that your groups in the book do to reveal this is incredible. But something to move on with that one, and that's the church has very strict roles for men and women. And we've kind of been hitting around the corners on this, but I want to move into this, is how do these roles affect both people in the church and when they leave the church, the expectations. And I'll throw this out there as kind of as a something to think about, is that this is kind of widely quoted, but prescription drug use in our state in 2002 was rated the largest in the country. At that point, we had over twice the amount of antidepressants being used by women than any other state in the union. And there's a lot of questions about why that was happening. But part of that was the fact that women were being put, there's speculation, and maybe I ought to ask you, I don't know if no one here is necessarily a clinical psychiatrist or a psychologist, so this would be within the experience of the people that you've spoken to. But what is your experience about the roles that people are in the church? And is it really a voluntary thing? And what kind of conflicts does this make inside of themselves and in the lives, either when they're in the church and when they leave? Dan, did you know?
I know from personal experience with several friends and relatives who were either in the church or left the church, that it was a really psychologically damaging experience for a lot of people. When you're raised your entire life to be obedient and to not question anything, it allows all manner of abuse to run rampant throughout the church. We see it all the time. I know people who have been sexually or physically abused by their husbands or wives as part of the church, and in one instance, someone was told. In one instance, someone was suffering physical and mental abuse and went to their local ward bishop and was told that you just need to submit. You need to submit. You need to obey your husband. This is Satan trying to divide your family. These people aren't psychologists or psychiatrists. They're not mental health professionals. They're people who serve a church calling because they've been deemed more worthy or more faithful than anybody else in the congregation. I think it's disturbing to see this trend where lay people are put in a position of authority over their congregation and have really terrible views or absolutely no education in areas where they're offering this type of advice.
Josh, just a question for you, follow up, or you can go with that, or just have a...
Some interesting tidbits. First, in the US versus Europe, sexual activity rates are actually the same for teens, but guess which has quite a bit higher pregnancy rates? The US. And
We're number one.
We're number one. And part of it is that people aren't taught properly about sex. I mean, you can see how, even in Utah, some people are withdrawn from sex ed classes because it's too provocative, or for whatever reason. But on top of that, as far as the whole male-female thing, one thing that you do find a lot in the church is that friendships, relationships, what you see is often fairly superficial. And so another interesting tidbit is that when you compare per capita Salt Lake City versus LA versus New York, plastic surgeons, we have nearly twice or 3 times as many, I can't remember exactly what, plastic surgeons. And so, you know, part of the question is why does that occur? Why are we number 1 for porn? Why are we number 1 for antidepressants? And, you know, I think a large part of it is you're taught, you focus so much on the wrong issues that, like, it becomes too much of a focus. And you don't actually address the issues that need to be addressed, and your focus becomes the things that aren't really that important, and so you find things that just happen in the extreme. And people just don't have adequate knowledge about a lot of these, like, how to date outside of the church, and I don't remember where I was going, but there's that.
Well, let me ask you a question, kind of related. What's the ratio of men versus women in the postmodern group?
Ooh, well,
To the 6.
so actually, generally across the entire U.S., most secular groups are heavily dominated with men. It's probably 80-90% men versus 10% women. And you'll find that fewer women leave the church. Like, the group that's leaving the church the fastest here in Utah is the 25 to 35 male range. You find about half as many people, or half as many women, 25 to 35, who are the second largest group. And then after that, it's just everything else. I think the third largest is the 15 to 25, but it's a large number. In fact, sorry, I like statistics. I remember them a lot. In Salt Lake, there are 2 single guys per single woman. In Provo, there is one single guy per 2 single women. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, why is that? What affects that? And one large thing could be that men, you know, leave the church more frequently, as, you know, already mentioned. And maybe it's because women are more social creatures, and yeah. Anyways.
Elaine, what's your perspective on this one?
I love this topic so much because I think that in our culture we really shy away from stereotypically gendered discussions, and I've always loved them. So one comment that I saw on a Facebook page called The Community, which is an underground BYU secular group that is closed and secret, so don't look it up. But one fascinating comment thread that happened there a couple of years back was many of the women in the group were feeling that anytime they attended a social, they were in a meat market. They were looked at as eye candy and not intelligent beings at all. And there were so few of them that they would sort of feel all of this male energy gaining up or gathering towards just wanting to date them. And their perspectives as leaders or intelligent beings were really not valued, and so they would bring this up in the Facebook groups and try to recruit more of their female friends for support and all of that. But one thing that one of the women who was LDS was saying, she was going through an incredibly hard time because through her transition out of Mormonism, she suddenly had to think about what she wanted to do with her life. She suddenly had to choose a career, a college major, a topic of general interest. She had never in her life, up to the age of 18 to 20, thought about what she might want to do other than be a mother. And so she said, this is a very challenging time because all of a sudden I want to start seeing myself as a woman capable of earning something, as a woman capable of doing something career-wise that I love and enjoy. And it's incredibly difficult to find that drive and that motivation and something that really interests me. And one of the men in the group brought up a similar circumstance where, as a male coming out of the LDS church, in order to be a viable dating partner to any secular, non-religious woman, he had to battle an entire growing up perspective of misogyny and an entire ingrained culture telling him that he was all powerful and domineering over the female sex. And so he had to completely reframe his mindset as well. And I think that was a really fascinating example to me of some of the gendered issues that come out of Mormonism's indoctrination of those roles.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that the men are have just as much to relearn as the women do.
Definitely.
And Dan, you're as a director over the Atheist, you get to see both sides of this. What's been your experience? Do guys get women? And do women understand men? I'm sorry, it's a gendered way to put it. But how do you see that conflict resolving itself, or does it resolve itself?
It's difficult. I think it's definitely a challenge within the secular community. And I've tried, I've thought about this on multiple levels. There's been so much drama and so much infighting within the secular community about this subject for the past, I don't know, 3 years or more. Of course, it's always been a topic, but the past few years in particular, it's been a really contentious debate back and forth. And I know that within our own group, we've had to deal with different issues between different members who, one person may think that a member is flirting too much, or is only in the group to hit on people, or is trying to use it as a dating service, or is making other female members uncomfortable. And so we try to limit most of the discussion to just secular topics. But human beings are social animals, and naturally, single people who are in a social group are going to reach out to one another to see if there's a mutual interest in each other. So it's a constant battle back and forth between wanting to provide a social community that can address a large portion of the needs of our members, and protecting those members who may feel threatened one way or another if it's been perceived that they're just part of a large meat market. And it's something that we're constantly reevaluating and reassessing and working to improve on. I know for a fact we're not perfect in that area. It's something that we're always working on.
So, I guess one of the questions is, what can we do about it? And Josh, I was going to ask, you've got a couple things. You probably have something, but you've got a wonderful women's group inside of Post-Mormons.
Yeah, well, it is a constant issue, like Dan said, that comes up very frequently, and we're addressing it among our admins all the time. Recently, in our Provo group, there was actually a coffee night where we had men and women discuss how we can improve basically relationships between men and women, and help protect people who are kind of in a vulnerable position when they show up to our groups. And among the things that we do, one is we have a strong women's group. We have a private women's page, and it's actually helped even out our male-female ratio in our group, generally. And then second to that, it's having people inside your group, particularly the admins, but also everyone else in the group, just be aware to watch out for new people or people who haven't been around for a long time, and make sure they're comfortable, make sure that if all that's happening to them is being hit on, they're probably not going to come back. I see it time and time again. And so make sure that there is an actual connection that's not relationship-based, romantic relationship-based. And so those are the basic things that we can do. Other than that, we've had a therapist talk to our group once, and we need to do that more often. Just how to have relationships outside of the Mormon realm. And other than that, I don't know, and can always use more.
So I've hit the min up on this question, and Elaine and Joanne, maybe you can speak to this if you like. But let me ask, do we get it? I mean, we spent this country's been, for the most part, built by and structured for white males. I mean, that's for 200 years. It's been a majority, the power structure, the politics, the social structure, all of that's been put together. And the communities are trying. I mean, there's absolutely no question. As a male myself, we're trying to understand the issues. But I feel like from some of the conversations I've seen as well in the social communities, that we are blind to some of the issues that are there. What is your perspective on that? And maybe part of this is just we're as damaged as women are when we come out of this community. But what has been and Joanne, if you want to respond as well, how do we deal with this? How do we figure this out? And I'll add one last comment to that, because one of the most dangerous things you can do, especially to in my mind, to a man that is active and really is trying to embrace feminism, is cut us off. Because we try and we're blindsided, and it's like, you can't tell us we're not trying to be feminists, when in fact we probably aren't. And we just don't understand the issues. So I'll leave that to your comments.
Well, I think basically religion is at the center of it. It's at the center of the problem. It's the cause of the problem. And so fighting organized religion, these stereotypes, is going to be the only way to ever have equality between men and women. And just sitting here listening to you discuss this, I realized that the title of my book is right on. You know, I was a little reluctant, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but religion, social gatherings between men and women, even, as far out as polygamy that I was involved in, it is all about the sex. We're human beings, and we could get into a whole psychological and medical discussion about it. But I learned from religion as a child what the roles of men and women were, what sex was for, and how to be really messed up and feel guilty about it. So, yeah, there's a lot of abuse and a lot of misinformation, and I think religion's at the base of it.
Thank you.
I agree so deeply with all of your perspectives and thank you for bringing in a psychologist to talk to your members about it, because that's incredible. I would say that and one of the discussions that Shift invited a speaker for in 2010, I think, was Greta Christina. She's amazing. If you haven't heard her speak, look her up. And I would go at answering your question, Brian, by I'm gonna ask you all to take a little bit of a journey with me. And I'll try and make it brief. Close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you are being raised, you're a child, you're being raised by two gay dads. And these gay dads just love you so much, and you have a couple siblings, and they, as they grow up, realize that they're gay too, and they're super excited your brother's super excited to date boys and take them to the prom, and your sister's really excited to date girls and ask them out to the dances. And you find that you are inexplicably attracted to someone of the opposite gender, but everyone around you is only hooking up with their same gender. What does that feel like to be in that society that is so ostracizing, that is so not accepting of who you feel you are. And you want, if you're a boy, you want to ask a girl out. If you're a girl, you find yourself really wanting to ask a boy out, but it would be completely unacceptable. It would be terrible. And you can open your eyes, and I just want you to think for a second about what it's like to be different. Whether you're male or female or transgender or cisgender, whether you're gay or lesbian or straight or bisexual, all of us are human, and we do have that in common. And so as much as these issues of feminism and misogyny tend to really distance us from understanding each other, if we take every category away and say we're all human beings, and we look into another person's eyes and try to understand them, that's the best we can do. At the end of the day, that's the most we can hope for, is that we can try to understand each other. And so I would encourage you, if you've never considered feminist perspective because it's just never been relevant to you, I would encourage you to ask yourself what it might feel like to be a woman, surrounded by people who are taller and stronger and bigger than you, and never wanting to go outside at night because you might be attacked. Or, I mean, I'm a pretty small woman, and not all women face that, but there's some serious differences between the genders that we grow up in this society. We have certain expectations of what women are going to do. If you've, as a man, never thought about what it must feel like to only be defined by your biological ability to have children, that's kind of a weird way to be raised. And so just trying to see from other perspectives, I think, really is the best we can do in all of our groups, to see each other as human beings.
So part along with that is the church's capability. I mean, as you in your book talk about with 2 or 3 or 4 wives, where women start seeing themselves as merchandise. It's part of the long-term, the rape culture that we get into, where a woman's value is often defined by, it's a transaction. One of the questions, I'm going to kind of tie this in, Josh, back to you about that comes up is you touched on this, but I want to follow up from a question in the audience too, is what does this do to dating? How difficult, and with the new members, I mean, I've been with your group occasionally as well, and as you kind of touched on this a little bit, what do people need to relearn or can't relearn in order to start doing that social environment? And what do they carry? What's the baggage they carry with them out of the church? This is from the audience too. So.
You're right. Well, the thing is you'll find people all across the spectrum in our group who show up for the first time. There are people who are recently out of the church, like a week out of the church, and then people who have been out of the church for years or decades. And the unfortunate part is because we don't have equal men and women, we don't have the best opportunities to always have people meet spouses, people who they would date or be very compatible with. But the truth is we've had a lot of success in our group. You and Lisa, for example, met originally in our group. So there's a few weddings this year just of people who have met in our group. And so even though there are some weird things that happen because of the baggage of the church, you find that a lot of people have a lot of compatibility, and some of these relationships, both romantic or just friendships, last a really long time. What does it do to dating? We're probably not the best place to go to if you want to date, but if you do happen to find someone, you'll probably find someone who you really get along with. So
it's very true. We could stay on the subject all evening. I mean, there's a lot to cover on this, but there's a few other items that we brought up that were given to us. An interesting question that came up, and this has to do with people's willing to donate. I imagine it's donating money and donating time. for those of you that are in the groups, what's your experience been? I mean, in the church, the expectation is you give 10% of your money, and you give basically every free moment of your time. How does it, raising donations or getting volunteers, what's people's response to that? Are they as open? Is it more difficult? And is because they were in the church, does that affect that as opposed to someone that maybe never been in the church? Elaine, you're all ready to go.
I'm like, I've worked a lot in the nonprofit community here in Utah as volunteers, volunteer capabilities and paid responsibilities. And it's actually, a study came out a couple of years ago that says Utah is #1 in the nation in philanthropic giving. So take that along with your antidepressants. A lot of people experience an amazing amount of joy the moment they realize that they no longer have to give 10% of every penny they earn to an organization that they no longer feel represents them. Personally, the time in my life that I found out that I don't believe this anymore, I looked at my schedule and found that I had been volunteering 12 hours a week for the LDS Church in various capacities, from preparing lessons to the time I spent in church or at meetings. And I went to my local college service learning center at Salt Lake Community College and said, put me to work for 12 hours a week, because I obviously have the time and I better fill it with something other than sleeping and being depressed. So I think that what we have here is this weird dichotomy in Utah where we have a high percentage of philanthropic giving and people caring for other people, and we have a high amount of volunteerism and philanthropic feeling in our communities. And so even once we leave those communities, I do think that sticks with people. It's a lot harder to herd the non-joiners. A lot harder.
Dan, you've had a lot of success. Your group seems to have a lot of activities and such. How do you do it? What do you find the challenges are?
I think we have a lot of events and a lot of activities. Speaking specifically about the financial aspect of it, it's much more difficult to get people to donate not just their time but their money to secular causes. I hear all the time from people who say, well, I left the church because they wanted 10% of my money, and now you want me to pay $25 for annual membership? How dare you, sir? That's ridiculous. I won't do that. I'm not a joiner. I'm not going to pay to associate with people who share a common interest with me. But I expect that when I go there will be pizza and plates and cups and napkins and a facility for me to enjoy all of these things in free of charge, because all of that just falls off a truck.
Because I've been paying for it my whole life.
Right. Yeah, I've given all of that money to the church. Why don't you have it? So, it is really, really difficult to get people to donate to secular causes. I know recently there's been kind of a resurgence or a more specific desire of people who want to give this a lot more attention, who want to be able to donate a lot more money to secular organizations and secular causes. I myself spend probably a lot more than is, I don't know, wise maybe. I put a ton of my own personal funds into secular organizations, particularly Atheists of Utah, because it's a labor of love. I want to see it succeed. I want it to do good. I want it to help other people. I think it's hugely beneficial for a large number of people in the state. But getting other people to realize that it's not just getting together and talking about how much we how much we dislike organized religion. It's a lot of providing support for people. It's donating to other causes. It's purchasing supplies and equipment for the events that we do put on. It's paying for a camping site when we do our annual camping trip. It's renting out a space for our gala. It's purchasing items for us to sell. It's paying for registration and booth space at the Pride Festival. I mean, there are a ton of things that we have to spend money on as an organization that doesn't magically appear, and that we don't say to all of our members, hey, you need to give us 10% of your income in order to accomplish these things. And sure, Utah has, is listed as one of the top states in the nation philanthropically money-wise, because people count their tithing as being this wonderful thing, and they're donating 10% of their income to a charity. And I think that's a load of crap. I mean, they're donating 10% of their income to an organization that actively works to suppress civil rights for other people.
They're buying.
Right.
It's not a donation, it's a purchase.
Right, yeah, it's not a donation, it is mandatory, it's required if you are going to be viewed as, one of the more faithful members of that religion. And that's sad, but it makes them, hugely successful financially. I wish that people would maintain that same sensibility once they leave a religion. There are online resources for secular tithing, where you can go in and pick specific groups that you want to donate your funds to. I think it would be awesome if more people would donate more to secular organizations, because money ultimately is what moves a lot of it's what gets a lot of the social movements going and provides the resources necessary to keep them going and growing.
So in a lot of ways, we're our own worst enemies here, because we teach people to be independent, and then they become independent, and then we don't get the support. Josh, you've been writing furiously over there.
Well, I have had a similar experience as Dan. It is hard to get donations to our group, because people are always questioning, what are you going to spend it on? Are you going to spend it on pizza for yourself or coffee or whatever? And it's a legitimate question. But, the truth is I probably donate more, well, not more than a couple people, but like the admins in my group are the people who donate the most, both time and money. And outside of that, there's, a couple people who've donated over the past few years, very small donations. One guy who's donated a little bit, which I'm very grateful for. And the truth is there's a lot of fees, like Dan mentioned. I mean, there's meetup fees, there's library fees, speaker fees, campsites, advertising, and it eventually just adds up. And we could always use more time, people who just want to help out. I find that, though, when you do have a specific event and you advertise, we need so-and-so number of people or so-and-so money for this event, that I can't get volunteers. People are very eager to, but they just want to see exactly what they're adding to. Yeah.
Perfect. So we have about 5 minutes. The library closes at 9. We can go a little bit closer to 8:45. But we have one more section that I really wanted to comment on, but I don't know, we're probably not going to be able to open up. So I want to go to the opening comments and then encourage anyone here, or anyone that's going to be looking at this online, to go and take a look at the webpage, and we'll open up comments there. But an interesting thing about Utah is a lot of people don't know what our Constitution says around the separation of church and state. Is that as the U.S. Constitution has, fairly, it's like 2 lines. But the Utah Constitution says, it's Article 1, Section 4, the rights of conscience shall never be infringed. The state shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. No religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office of public trust or for any vote for any election. Nor shall any person be incompetent as a witness or juror who, on account of the religious belief or absence thereof, there shall be no union of church and state, nor shall any church nor shall any church dominate the state or interfere with its function. No public money or property shall be appropriated for or applied to any religious worship, exercise, or instruction, or for the support of any religious establishment. Sorry. jumped over the last word. So we have a very wordy constitution about the separation of church and state. And what I'm going to encourage is that it can be a long subject, and we certainly don't have time to cover it now. So we're going to post this, and we're going to look for some conversations, because this goes from immigration, gay marriage, abortion, drinking, public spaces, Sunday access to public spaces, medical choices, pseudo-medicine, vaccination. The list is huge, and there's a lot of things. So we'll put that out there, and if anyone's interested in continuing that conversation online, look for us at reasonutah.org. But I do want to give you some final plans. Realize we're going to have to be kind of short. So in 1 minute, I'll start this, work way down. Joanne, what do you see as success for you with your book? You made a comment at the end, and I think, what do you want your book to do? What do you see as being success?
Well, I don't want to infringe on anyone's rights. So there's a fine line, because there are a lot of people who I have heard don't think there's anything wrong with polygamy or polyamorous, is that the correct word? Any different kind of relationship. And I agree with that, to the point where abuse is involved, and obviously adult choices.
I think Greta Christensen put it best when she says, as long as no one is being hurt.
Yeah.
She did a wonderful job.
Yeah, and I was of age, but I was very hurt. my whole life up until the age of 45. Yes, I am older than 45. I look back and think, oh my gosh, I messed it up so badly, and a lot of it is bad decisions, and a lot of it is other people abusing and controlling me.
Elaine, what do you see success for the groups that you're in, your ministry? What do you see success as?
Well, I'm gonna take this chance to point back to the clipboard that we passed around, and I don't know if you all saw the clipboard, but we're gonna leave it on this table in case you want to sign up at the end. The greatest hope that I have is that we can focus on the positive together, and that we can make a lasting difference in each other's lives. And in response to the National Day of Prayer that happened today, May 1st, we're celebrating the National Day of Reason, and I'd love to invite each of you to celebrate a month of care in replacement of that day of prayer. And what we have going is, if you know anyone, for any reason, who needs a home-cooked meal sometime in the month of May, if you could write your contact information on this sheet, I will contact you. And also write your contact information if you would be available to make a meal for someone and deliver it to them. Just a small way that we can care for each other.
Excellent. Dan?
So what is the question? What is
success for the group? What do you, maybe the next 5 years, 10 years, let's not talk into the world, but where do you see, how would you measure your success and be successful?
Well, if we're talking ultimate success, and you said not necessarily that, but I mean, ultimately, I would imagine that Atheists of Utah exists so that we will one day not have to exist. I hope to one day be able to not have to worry that my coworkers or somebody that I would choose to have a professional relationship with would deem me as less than worthy or less than trustworthy or honest, just simply because I don't share the same religious beliefs that they do. Short term for Atheists of Utah, I would like it to just continue to grow and thrive and be a resource for people here who have left religion, who have left various types of religion, And when that happens, they end up leaving behind a huge portion of their social structure. You know, Elaine talked about all of the volunteer hours that she would put in with the LDS Church, and that happens with everybody, and that happens with a lot of different religions. I think the LDS Church is much more successful in getting people to donate time and money than a lot of the other religions. But once people leave that religion behind, they leave behind all of that social structure, they leave behind all of that time that they had spent building relationships with people who did share the same religious beliefs. And so, you know, I hope that Atheists of Utah and the other groups that are in the Coalition of Reason are here to catch those people when they fall or when they need that social structure and want to reach out to somebody and build more relationships outside of religion.
And thank you. It's now 2-0 to 0 to 0 for the Coalition of Reason. So actually, I'm going to change just a little bit on yours, and feel free to. I know you're ready to answer on this, but I'm going to give you an exclusive answer to one other question as well, since your group is focused specifically on the LDS Church. And not only where do you see success, but where do you see the LDS Church or religion in general in the next 5 or 10 years? If you're successful, if we're successful at what we're trying to do, in bringing the reason and bringing fairness and science forward, where does religion run to, or where do they go? What space do they occupy? As well as the other question.
Okay, so first off, thank you, Brian, Zach, Evelyn, for putting this together. Ultimate success is whether we've had an impact on someone's life, whether we've improved that life for the better. And it's just one life is, you know, there's the scripture, if you bring one life unto atheism, how great shall be your joy. I think it's in Doctrine and Covenants. I forget, it's a little fuzzy. But ultimately, I see the LDS Church as becoming more and more irrelevant. And as it does that, it will become more extreme and lash out, trying to remain relevant. And you can see that in this last year, where they tried to influence the alcohol laws. And there was some speculation that that was actually because the gay marriage was legalized in Utah, and that they were weird connection. Maybe excuse me, but just you'll see them lash out more and more, and probably become more extreme or more liberal. Either way, it will become less relevant. And so, as far as success for our groups. The big thing is we all need a community to find. We need a place to find people for support, friendship. We need a place to meet each other. And where do you do that in Utah if you're not Mormon? Our groups are a big place where a lot of us have found friendships, relationships that really can't be replaced. As far as what I'd like to see between Mormons and secular groups, is just a better mutual understanding and respect. Personally, I don't care whether you're Mormon, whether you're not Mormon, whether you're atheist, spiritual, whatever. It's just, I want you to be able to talk with someone who has a different viewpoint and not completely think they're an idiot. I mean, that sounds probably kind of funny, but the truth is my favorite people are Mormons. I love them, and regardless of what they believe, I want them to be able to respect and love me the same way I love them. And ultimately, that's where I want success in general. And then for our groups, just to have a community that's vibrant, whatever it's called, 5-10 years from now.
Wonderful. So we have 2 more things we'd like to cover in a second. But first I want to take an opportunity, Josh, Dan, Elaine, and Joanne, thank you very much for participating on this panel. Very much enjoyed your questions, and I do have one last question for you after Dan, and I also want to thank Zach and Evelyn, they're the president and vice president of the Coalition of Reason, and for their support here. Thank you very much. I know this work well done to help bring this, and I've just been lazy and just got to stand up here and ask questions. But I do want to take a moment. Last month, a pillar in our community passed away, and was someone that has touched so many lives that people aren't even aware of it. So Dan did a wonderful. You have some some comments that you've made that you'd like to do for Richard Andrews. I don't know if you've got those prepared, or you can say just a little bit about, if you want to give him just a minute.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Richard Andrews passed away. And I think all of us here, regardless of which particular secular group we belong to currently, owe a lot of the progress and where we are today because of his efforts. He had been an open and outspoken atheist here in Utah for more than 30 years. He had organized several different organizations here in Utah, had been president or co-organizer for different organizations. Excuse me. He traveled the country with Madalyn Murray O'Hair back in the day, was regional director for American Atheists here in Utah for years and years, started the original atheist group here in Utah. It's changed names and affiliations a couple times, but I mean, he was always at the heart of the atheist movement here in Utah. He was a pillar, and one of the things that I most admire about Richard is that he didn't talk a whole lot about his history or his personal life or any of the things that he had done unless you specifically asked him. And I think that's in a way, it's something that I admire about him, and I'll miss him a ton. But in a way, it's also a little bit sad that because he was so humble and so had such humility, that most people probably in the organizations today have no idea who he is or what he did. And that's sad, but he was awesome. I mean, I loved working with him. He was brilliant. He was a speed reader. I mean, he read tons and tons of stuff all the time. And any of you who did know Richard probably would recognize that whenever he pulled up in his car, his dashboard was just jam-packed with different leaflets and pamphlets from people. I mean, just coming in, it looked like his dashboard had exploded with pamphlets because they were just stuffed everywhere. He always had different books with him. He was brilliant and so giving. It was a huge loss. I'll miss him a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very
Thank you.
Really quick, we have very little time, but I do want to have enough time that if someone's interested in going back and looking at the books. Can you just give a real quick summary of what events, I'm going to start with you, Josh, and work way down here, that you, your group, or yourself, you'd like to talk about the next month or 2 months that are going on, that, if any?
Yeah, April 28th, the last Wednesday, no, May 28th, the last Wednesday of the next month. Pat Bagley, either here or at the University of Utah. He'll also be giving autographs. And then in June and July, lots of campouts, barbecues, and boating events. Then in about August, we will be having the guy who's been putting together what are those church statements? Give us a speech, basically defending the church about ex-Mormon stuff that we get wrong or whatever on the first vision. I don't know, something like that. But it definitely will be a good one to bring a believing member to.
And if people want more information on this, they can come to our webpage or
postmos.org, postmos.org.
Thank you, Dan.
Atheists of Utah always has several different events planned. Coming up, some of our larger events will be the summer solstice party that will be hosted at my house and Tracy's house in Clearfield. It's also our annual members meeting where we will be voting on 3 board positions that are opening up. We will be participating in the Pride Festival and Parade. We'll be volunteering at Planned Parenthood to get the safe sex kits put together for the Pride Festival. We have our camping trip coming up. We have weekly coffee chats, both in Salt Lake City and in Ogden. tons and tons of things going on all the time. You can find all of our events on Facebook, on Meetup, and at our website and the UCOR website, atheistsofutah.org.
Great, thank you. And I know you have weekly coffees as well. Yeah. Elaine?
I will just point you towards the humanistsofutah.org, as well as Minister Elaine, ELAINE.blogspot.com. There's so much going on. Again, Pride. Humanists of Utah will have a booth this year, our first, and the annual summer board. I'm at a total loss for a word. An amazing
But it's
brunch
at
thing at one of our board members' house in August.
This is for the humanists?
The Humanists of Utah. So, humanistofutah.org, they have their upcoming events. They have speakers come every month. Yeah.
All right. And Joan, what kind of book opportunities?
Well, first of all, I'd like to put in a plug for Drinking Skeptically, which Steve Kuno, my boyfriend and as told to author, is in charge of putting together.
Wonderful.
And I've learned a lot going to that. And also, I'm going to go ahead and say that I might be able to make a presentation at TAM, the amazing meeting. I hope all of you know about that. Steve has spoken there a couple of times. And getting involved in the skeptical, the scientific community is a good way to promote the things that we are trying to do and believe in.
Alrighty, great. And you do have books back that you can purchase tonight.
Books.
You'll have about 5 minutes. So, again, I'd like to thank everyone for your participation in this. More information can be found on our Facebook page. You can go to our web page, but we'll point you to the Facebook page. Utah Coalition of Reason. Just look us up, like us. You'll see we'll have some conversations on there. Plus, you can reach all of the other groups' pages from us as well. Also, you've got the individual pages there. So once again, thank you and drive safely. Have a very good night.
Thank you.